The night bus into Chicago always smelled like burnt coffee and wet wool. Seats rattled. A baby fussed somewhere behind me, and the windows wore a thin skin of February grime. I kept my head down in a thrift store hoodie and counted exits like it was a prayer. Front door, side door near the snack counter, the loading bay that sticks if you don't put your shoulder into it. People looked at me the way people do when they think they know your story from your shoes. Discounted sneakers, duffel with a busted zipper, a bruise that makeup couldn't quite smother. I thought I'd blend into the 2 a.m. crowd. What I didn't expect was the way judgment hums in places like this, like the fluorescent lights. The driver announced a 15-minute stop. I slid off the bus with my duffel and my venture card and pretended to scroll. My palms were cold, even though the station was overheated enough to make the air taste like radiator. A TSA-looking security guard flicked his eyes over me and then through me. I got that a lot. It's a special kind of invisibility that still burns. I moved toward the coffee kiosk and ordered the cheapest pour over on the board. The kid behind the counter didn't meet my eyes. He did. However, pour extra and slide a second packet of sugar my way like a small rebellion against whatever he thought I'd been through. Maybe he clocked the bruise. Maybe he just believed in caffeine as first aid. I took a seat with a clear line to the doors and set my phone face down. No notifications was good news. No notifications also felt like a trap. When the automatic doors hissed open and a man in a dark peacoat stepped in, shoulders squared against the wind, half the station looked up. He had that quiet, expensive look. Nothing flashy, just the kind of fit and fabric that says the bill hurts. He didn't scan the room like a cop. He looked like someone used to being watched and completely over it. His gaze caught on my duffel when the zipper gave up and spilled my life onto the tile. Worn paperback, half a bag of almonds, a cheap external hard drive the size of a matchbox in a sock to keep it from scratching. "Allow me," he said. And it wasn't a line. His voice was warm but sanded down, like someone who'd learned to speak low so people lean in. He crouched, gathered everything without commenting on the sock, and held out the paperback first, then the drive, waiting until I took each before offering the next. People don't think that matters. It does. "Thanks," I said. I kept the table between us, fingers curled around that drive. "You okay?" he asked. Not the way you ask a stranger. The way you ask, like you're ready for the truth. I thought about lying. Instead, I said, "I'm cold." He unwound his scarf, a soft navy thing that smelled faintly like cedar and laundry done on schedule, and set it on the table edge. "You can return it at the door if you hate the color," he said. A hint of a smile. I didn't take it. Not yet. The intercom crackled. Delays? Ice on the ramp? A woman swore. Somewhere a vending machine clunked. He didn't leave, even though his kind of coat never stays in bus stations longer than necessary. "You look like you want to be anywhere but here," he said. "Same," I answered, because it was true. He nodded at the duffel. "Headed far?" "Far enough," I said, and breathed past the ache in my ribs that flared when I shifted. "I'm Cass," he offered. Not a full name, not a business card, just a syllable left on the table like the scarf. "Naomi," I said, because my own name felt like a promise to myself. He considered that like names were data, and he was good at cross-referencing. "I've got a ride out of here that's warmer and less delayed," he said lightly, as if it were a casual thing to say in the middle of a bus terminal at stupid o'clock. "If you want a lift, you pick the destination, you pick where you sit. You can say no after yes at any moment, and I won't ask why. People tell you offers like that don't happen. They do. Sometimes. In the ugliest places. That's what makes them so hard to trust." "I don't get in cars with strangers," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. He nodded like he'd expected that. "Good rule," he said. "I have a few of my own. No touching without clear permission. No questions you have to explain. And you get the seat by the door." He glanced at the scarf, then at me. "And you keep the scarf. Consider it a rental paid up front for your time deciding." I watched him while the station hummed and the coffee burned a line down my throat and that drive in my fist felt heavier than it should. He didn't look like danger in the obvious ways. He looked like someone who could walk away from a fight because he was certain he wouldn't need to prove anything. The kind men with badges hate. "What's in it for you?" I asked. It wasn't flirting. It was the whole point. "Control of my schedule," he said. "I prefer not to be at the mercy of the icing crews." He tilted his chin toward the doors, where sleet slapped the glass. "And maybe," he added after a beat, "the selfish satisfaction of being useful for a change." The way he said it made me think of a life built on doing for others with strings attached, and how tired he sounded of the strings. I pulled a bent receipt from my pocket and a hotel pen, and I wrote 3 lines, printing neat because neat felt like power. 1. I sit by the door. 2. No physical contact unless I ask first. 3. You take me where I say and stop if I say stop. I slid the receipt over. "Sign if you mean it." He didn't laugh. He didn't make a show of it. He put the scarf on, read every word, and signed CV like it was a contract. He slid it back and added a 4th line. 4. You can change your mind at any time. No explanation required. Then he signed again and underlined it. Something in my chest unclenched. It wasn't that I trusted him. Trust is a word people throw around when they mean I'm tired. It was that he understood the rules I needed to breathe. "One more thing," I said, surprising myself. "We walk out separately. If I don't like the car, I take the sidewalk, and this conversation never happened." "Done," he said, already stepping back, already giving me space to choose. I wrapped the scarf because I was shaking, and because it was warmer than the hoodie, and because it felt like a choice I made, not a favor I owed. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. Unknown number. The kind of number that makes your stomach drop. I didn't look. I stood, slung the duffel, and took the long way to the doors, past the wall of tourist brochures and a poster for a Navy Pier fireworks show I'd once promised myself I'd see. Outside, wind knifed down Canal Street and set my eyes watering. A black SUV idled under the parking sign, salt-crusted on the wheel wells like lace. Cass stood a safe distance away, hands visible, gaze on the street, not on me, like a man who knew what it meant to make a door feel like a door, not a trap. I told myself I was just taking a look. I told myself I could walk. What I didn't expect was the way the driver, older, union jacket, a socks cap pulled low, tipped his head at me first and said, "Ma'am," like I wasn't a problem to be solved, but a person to be asked. "Where to?" he said, and I heard my own voice answer. "Someplace with a lock I control." Cass didn't blink. "We'll find one," he said. "You'll choose it." And the station door hissed shut behind me like a point of no return I got to set for once. I didn't pick the destination to be romantic. I picked a short term rental over a bodega on Kinsey with a real deadbolt and a door I could wedge. Cass didn't argue. He paid the driver, handed me the scarf back like a library book I'd checked out, and carried my duffel upstairs without crossing the threshold until I said, "Okay." The place had honest floors, scuffed oak that didn't pretend to be anything else, and a 2 burner stove that clicked 3 times before it caught. The kind of apartment you can walk away from if you have to. He stood in the hall, hands visible, and I laid out the paper I'd made him sign in the station, then added lines with a hotel pen because the words felt like armor when they were inked. No cameras in the bathroom or bedroom. No tracking my phone. No questions about anything that starts with, "Why didn't you?" He read it, nodded once, and pulled a thin black card case that looked too expensive for words. He tucked a plain debit card and a folded Post, it on top of my paper. Card has a daily cap. Post, it has the building Wi-Fi and the super's number. "You don't owe me receipts, Naomi. You owe yourself sleep." He didn't look noble when he said it. He just looked like a guy who'd been up too many nights and learned that control breaks people faster than fear. I set a chair under the knob and slid the chain anyway. It wasn't about him. It was about 1,000 small moments that taught me doors swing both ways. Then I opened my duffel on the kitchen table and dumped my life out in piles. Paperbacks, thrifted sweater, the little hard drive in the sock, a spiral notebook from Target where I'd already drawn a crude map of names and arrows. If you're picturing the detective bulletin board with red string, lower your expectations. My string was yellow legal. Pad lines and highlighters I bought on clearance at Jewel. Osco. Green was money. Red was injuries that, accidentally, happened. Blue was who smoothed things over after. I started from memory, because memory is what Trent always underestimated. He thought of me as the quiet clerk who filed his reports and alphabetized his mistakes. He never clocked that alphabetical order is a language you can weaponize if you learn how officers repeat names, how forms hide patterns, how the same 3 sergeants show up where they shouldn't. Cass texted me a photo from the hallway to keep the boundary literal, a takeout bag from Lou Mitchell's, and a carton of coffee by the door. Left side of the hall. No knocking. You can ghost me if you want. I'll be downstairs. I cracked the door, pulled the bag in with my sneaker like I was fishing, and ate at the counter while I built my table into a war room. I used sticky notes because they move when the picture changes. I drew a square around Trent's last 3 overtime assignments and circled the seized property log numbers that kept vanishing from the system. I made a list of places where women stop showing up in reports, but start showing up in ER intake notes with the same zip codes. Paper walls feel flimsy until you realize most doors are made of the same stuff. At some point, the radiator hissed itself into a lullaby. I opened the window an inch for the lake smell and set my phone on Do Not Disturb except for one contact, Rosa from the women's shelter at St. Agnes, who once taught me how to breathe through a panic attack in a church basement that smelled like coffee and pine. Soul. I texted her a code we'd made up months ago when I first told her I was leaving. Green. I'm out. She replied with a Brooklyn emoji she uses for I'm proud of you, and then a photo of a St. Michael medal on a keychain. Swing by when you can. No questions. It landed like a hand on my shoulder. You don't have to explain to every single person why you did what you did to survive. I built protocols because that's what calms my brain. I labeled a cheap burner with a Sharpie and taped it under the sink. If the main line goes dark, I go to the sink. I set a SAT text app to ping Cass once at noon and once at 10 with a single letter. Y for yes, I'm fine. N for no. We picked dumb phrases that wouldn't trip anyone's radar if overheard. If I texted Denver omelet, he'd call the super and the woman downstairs and then 311 before he called 911, because the first 3 will get you help without giving away your address to the wrong cop if the wrong cop is listening. I programmed the little handheld radios he dropped off, legal mirrors channels, nothing fancy, and wrote the channels in the back of my spiral. I taped a 3x5 card inside the cabinet door with the rules like I do with recipes. Rule 1, I say stop. Everything stops. Rule 2, doors open only when I say. Rule 3, we meet always in public first. My handwriting looked steadier than my hands felt. He came back up around midnight, only after he texted, "May I?" And I texted, "Yes." He stood in the doorway and didn't step over the tape line I'd made on the floor with painter's tape, because you can't keep a boundary if you don't make it visible sometimes. "Can I offer adjustments?" he asked, voice low, like we were studying for the same exam. "Offer," I said, and I meant it. "Then you decide." He suggested adding a second SAT option in case the app died. He offered a map that wasn't the one in my head. Safe coffee shops, where the baristas know him by first name and would rather throw hot espresso than let someone hassle me. A boxing gym in Pilsen, where the owner, ex-Marine, missing a tooth he's proud of, keeps a couch in the office and a policy of no drama, no questions. He said all of it like he was listing weather patterns. I clocked that and filed it under how he survives. "Why are you so good at this?" I asked, not looking up from my notes. He took a beat that told me the real answer wasn't neat. "Because I've been the problem, and I've been the person who fixed the problem, and I sleep better when I'm the latter," he said. "Also because my lawyer yells at me if I let pride make my decisions." He slid a pen toward me, solid, weighty, with his initials small on the clip. "This is yours now, so you don't have to borrow something with my name on it to write your rules." I almost laughed. It was such a small thing, but small things are the ones that used to get taken first. Around 2. A siren Dopplered past, and the upstairs neighbor dropped something heavy. I waited for the old gut punch of dread, and it didn't come. Not fully. I brushed my teeth with the new Target toothbrush I'd bought, because new is a spell you can cast on a body if you need to tell it we're not going back. I wedged the door, set the radio on the nightstand, and lay on top of the covers with my hoodie on and my shoes by the door, because change is incremental, and that's okay. Through the crack in the shade, I could see the Sears, Fine, Willis, tower blinking aviation red. I thought about the way Trent would slam cabinets just to flinch me. How he once said, "You're a file folder, Naomi. You keep things and you close." I let myself be angry for exactly 60 seconds, and then I let it go, because that's not a story I'm writing anymore. Sometime before dawn, I woke up, and didn't know why at first. Then I realized. Quiet. Not the dead quiet of danger. The regular quiet of a city resting. My phone was dark, except for Rose's last text. "Proud of you" doesn't expire. The chair was still against the door. The 3x5 card was still taped inside the cabinet. My rules were where I left them. The paper held. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it might hold again tomorrow. The morning of the hearing tasted like old coffee and wind off the lake. The kind of wind that gets under your coat and asks what you're really made of. Daly Plaza was a patchwork of pigeons and lawyers and people who had somewhere to be and people who didn't. The Picasso didn't blink. I stood there with a manila folder that looked like nothing and felt like a detonator. FOIA receipts, redacted pages, the chain of custody line where someone got sloppy at 2:13 a.m. on a Sunday. Cass kept his distance like we agreed. He wore that dark peacoat and the kind of expression you practice when you have to let someone do the dangerous part themselves. He didn't say, "You don't have to," he said. "I'll be where you can see me," and pointed, bench left of security, next to a woman feeding a toddler Cheerios out of a Ziploc. Rosa had texted me a prayer gif she knew I'd roll my eyes at and love anyway. Harper Lai met me at the entrance, hair tucked under a knit cap, recorder already rolling, even though she wasn't going to use it unless I said go. "You ready?" she asked. I told her the truth. "No, I'm doing it anyway." Inside, the meeting room looked like every city hearing you've ever seen on local TV. Flag, microphones that squeal when you breathe wrong, a clock that will eat your 2 minutes if you blink. The Chicago Police Board had a stack of cases, and the patience of people who have heard every story twice. The FOP rep sat with his arms crossed, and a face that said he'd already decided I was a liar because it was easier than considering the alternative. Trent wasn't in the room, or maybe he was. I'd learned not to look for him. Abusers teach you to scan, then punish you for scanning. I kept my eyes on the red, green timer and the sign taped to the podium. Public comment. 2 on quack. That's it. You get 2 minutes to flip your life. Before public comment, they called the first matter Harper's petition to admit a tranche of records under a pseudonymous source. Codename Kite. She stood, voice steady, and laid out the basics like a grocery list. Incident logs out of sync with ER intakes in 3 districts. Property rooms with more missing than math could explain. Internal complaints that evaporated. Me wrote through the case management system. Our source, Kite, provided cross, referenced datasets and time, stamped metadata, establishing edits to official reports outside authorized hours, she said. And the room did that thing where it quiets for real. Not out of politeness, but because the air has weight now. The FOP guy smirked and leaned to whisper to the assistant next to him. I'd seen that smirk. It said, "Sweetheart, you think you're the first." I thought I'd puke. What I didn't expect was the clerk in the corner sliding a paper cup of water toward the edge of her desk like I might need it when my name got called. Small mercies count. Public comment, the chair announced. A woman in a red coat talked about her son getting pulled over for a busted taillight that wasn't busted. A man in work boots asked why it takes a shooting to get anyone's attention. The timer chewed them both. Then they called me. Naomi Hart. My legs worked. That surprised me. I walked to the podium with my little folder like a kid bringing show. And tell. The mic was too short. I didn't touch it. I'm the clerk who filed things, I said. And the FOP rep's head tipped like, go on then. I alphabetized and date, stamped and did the boring parts no one brags about at happy hour. I know where the paper goes when people don't want it found. The timer clicked from green to yellow like a dare. You've been hearing about Kite, I said. That's me. It didn't sound brave. It sounded like a fact. I didn't look for Cass. I looked at the people who came here on their lunch break because they couldn't afford not to care. A murmur rolled the room. The FOP rep said, Ma'am, for your own legal... And the chair cut him with a look. I kept going because if you stop, you drown. I can tell you, the night Sergeant O'Hara used Detective Mallory's credentials to edit a report on a domestic call after midnight, and how the same complainant's name got misspelled different ways in 3 systems, as if that makes her less real. I can tell you the property number for an iPhone that never got logged, but somehow had its IMEI show up on a black market check 3 days later. I can tell you the memo where the word miscommunication stands in for bruise. My voice shook once and held. But none of that matters if we all agree women are unreliable narrators and cops have hard jobs, so we should leave them alone. What matters is that your systems let careless men hide in plain sight, and people like me, quiet people, paper people, see it. We remember. The timer flashed red. I looked at the chair. She looked tired and maybe a little sorry. 30 seconds, she said. It wasn't policy. It was grace. I'm not asking you to believe me because I'm crying or tough or whatever makes a good clip, I said. I'm asking you to look at the timestamps and the bodies attached to them. You know how many? You do. You just file it under regrettable and move on. Don't move on today. I stepped back. The mic squealed like it wanted the last word. I let it. The FOP rep started in about due process and witch hunts and anonymous sources with axes to grind. He didn't say my name, but he said it with his eyes. Kite is a made-for TV character, not a credible source, he declared to the ceiling. Harper raised a hand. Chair, permission to submit the authentication sheet for Kite's data? The chair nodded. Harper walked it over. You'll see the access logs trace back to a workstation signed in as Mallory on each edit window, she said. You'll also see the MAC address tells a different story, an external device piggybacked overnight twice a week. That's not TV. That's lazy. The FOP rep went a little gray. Lazy is the one insult that actually lands in a room like this. Someone in the back said, God bless you, baby, under her breath. I don't know if it was to me or the chair or the whole mess of us, but I took it. The board recessed. The room emptied like a lung. Harper's recorder stayed off. She kept her promise. You did good, she said. Good isn't safe, I said. And she didn't disagree. She just handed me a granola bar from the pocket of a coat that had seen 6 winters and 3 protests. Eat, she said. You can't fight on empty. In the hallway, the union guy tried to shoulder past me like I was furniture. Cass stepped in, not close, not blocking, just present. He introduced himself the way businessmen do when they handle crisis as a job. I manage a community legal fund, he said, and handed over a card that didn't mention the parts of his life you don't put on cards. Ms. Hart will have counsel by end of day. She's not anybody's anything. It was so flat it didn't sound like a sermon, which made it hit harder. The union guy looked at the card like it might burn him, and then at me, like I'd ruined something he thought belonged to him. You won't like how this ends, he said. That's the point, I said. and was proud of how even that landed. We crossed the plaza. The wind had teeth. A man sweeping salt into piles paused to let a couple joggers pass, and then looked at me like he recognized the flavor of trouble I was in. He tapped the broom to his chest twice. "Hey, I see you," and went back to work. In a city like this, that counts more than flowers. My phone buzzed with a number I didn't know, and I almost didn't look, and then I did because that's the rule now. Look on purpose. It was the clerk from the board, the one with the water. "Ms. Hart?" she said. "I shouldn't say this, but people heard you. Bureaucrats aren't supposed to be kind. Sometimes they are anyway." By the time we hit the corner, Harper had posted a thread that didn't name me, because consent isn't just for bodies. And Channel 7 had moved a truck into position. Cass kept pace at my shoulder without touching, a human version of a guardrail. "You hungry?" he asked. "Always," I said, "because adrenaline lies about appetite, but your body tells the truth later. There's a place on Wells that won't put you on a list," he said. "Dumb music, decent fries." We walked. I felt watched, but not alone. I thought about how Trent used to say, "You're a file folder," like I was a container, not a person. Today I opened myself and put my own name on the tab. It didn't feel like bravery. It felt like choosing the wind and letting the kite pull anyway, because that's what it was built to do. The backlash hit like lake, affect snow, sideways, stinging, and louder than it had any right to be. By noon, the union account had posted a slick statement calling the hearing a circus, and me, a disgruntled clerk, like my whole life could be filed under D for drama. By 2, a talk radio host said my anonymous hacker pal probably made everything up with AI, as if hospital intake records grew out of thin air and bruises were Photoshop. The only thing that landed was the notice from Internal Affairs that Trent was officially on leave. Badge in a drawer. Gun turned in. People texted me congrats like it was a promotion. I didn't feel promoted. I felt like I'd kicked a nest and learned how fast hornets organize. Cass kept the day ordinary on purpose. He showed up with a 6, pack of LaCroix, and a carton of soup from Manny's, and a list of errands he claimed he had to run in the neighborhood. When people want to control you, they make a production out of the smallest things. When people want you to choose, they make leaving easy. He left his keys on the counter and said he'd see me at 5. No follow. Up, you question mark. I cleaned the counter like I could wipe off the internet. I made another map. I put a sticky note on my duffel that said, "If we have to run, remember Chargers." I texted Rosa a photo of my 3x5 rule card, and she replied with a screenshot of a court flyer. "Know your rights? Wednesday nights. Church basement. Free childcare. When you're ready to teach a segment, say the word," she wrote, like she could see the future I was still auditioning for. At 4:12, Cass texted, "ETD 505, standard route. Radio check at 5 o'clock. I answered with Y and looked at my spiral, where I'd sketched our usual 3-block walk to his SUV and the side streets we could cut down if a news truck camped out. I don't know why I glanced at the neighborhood Facebook group then, but I did. And in between, somebody selling a used stroller and somebody complaining about fireworks in February was a post from the bodega owner 2 doors down. FYI. City truck, idling since 3:30 on Peoria. Cones out but no crew. Looks fake. It had one comment, "Call 311. It also had a photo, orange beacon light. No city seal. Cones too clean. I felt my stomach go cold in a precise way. You learn the difference between general fear and the fear that comes with math. I called the store. Mr. Diaz answered between customers, the bell on the door ringing in little bursts. "Senorita Naomi," he said, like we'd been neighbors for years. "That truck? Not city. I know city trucks. This one smells like cologne and excuses." He laughed, a dry sound. "They tried to get me to move my crates as code enforcement. I told them code enforcement speaks Spanish and knows my wife." He lowered his voice. "They parked where your friend's car turns, yes?" I didn't ask how he knew our turn. People who watch their block the way older men watch a ball game know more than cops on a map. Gracias, I said, putting a hand on the counter to steady myself, even though I was alone. If anyone asks, you didn't tell me a thing. Aye, please, he said, amused and offended in equal measure. I was born before your apps. I know when to keep my mouth shut. I texted Cass N and then Denver Omelet. 20 seconds later, the radio cracked. Copy. Alternate, route Bravo. And then the building lights flickered like a bad omen in a movie. I went to the window. Down on Peoria, the city truck threw on hazards and nudged into the turn lane like a cork in a bottle. At the same time, 2 sedans with dealer plates eased into the curb on our block. Noses pointed the wrong way. That wasn't random. That was someone reading our pattern. My chest got tight in that buzzing way that says panic is turning the lights up. I counted the rule card. I say stop. Everything stops. I texted, stop. A beat later, stopping. No arguments. Then upstairs, now. I heard Cass's steps on the stairs. And with him, 2 sets of feet I recognized. Paolo, who moves like he learned to walk in a hallway full of sleeping babies. And Miles, who always taps his front pocket twice, like he's checking for a lighter he doesn't smoke. They came in as far as the painter's tape line, and I could see the storm in Cass's jaw that he was choosing not to let out. He kept it simple. We have a leak, he said. Not your problem to solve. I said, it is my problem if my body is in the blast radius. Paolo flinched. Not because he disagreed, because it was true. I laid it out because that's what I do. First, the cones. Those came from a private supply, not streets and sanitation. Second, the dealer plates. Somebody doesn't want to be traced, not even to their own insurance. Third, timing. They parked right after you sent ETD en route on a channel only your team has. Fourth, and here I felt the ground tilt because I knew saying it would change the room. 2 nights ago at the gym, somebody used our Denver Omelet code as a joke when I was in the hallway. Only 3 people knew it then, and one of them was me. Miles smiled like a man auditioning for Harmless. You really think I'm your mole? He made it sound like an insult teenagers use. I looked at Cass. I don't think anything yet. I know what patterns look like when they start repeating. Paolo stood straighter. We'll lock it down. He meant lock the doors and ask forgiveness later. Cass shook his head once. We're not dragging this out into the hallway, he said, and shifted to me, like I was in on the plan, not the subject of it. What do you need to feel safe tonight? It shouldn't have knocked the air out of me, but it did. No one ever asked what I needed and meant it without strings. 3 things, I said. 1, kill anything that talks to the internet in here. If the thermostat so much as says hi to a cloud, I want it mute. 2, we stop using anything routed through your servers, phones, cameras, whatever. We go dumb. 3, I want a mesh we control with our own hands. Radios on a legal channel, nodes we can move if someone gets smart. All on paper, not your software. Cass studied me like I just handed him the answer key. You know how to build it? Well enough, I said. You can get gear at Ham Radio Outlet on 95th, or we can start cheap with the bow fangs you already gave me. We set a hop pattern that changes on even hours and cut the team into pods that only know one endpoint each. Paolo nodded, half impressed, half annoyed he hadn't pitched it first. Miles said, This is overkill. And it was the wrong sentence, in the wrong tone, at the wrong time. Cass's eyes flicked to Miles. Overkill keeps people breathing, he said, and there was a slice of cold in it I hadn't heard from him, the kind that makes men with badges remember paperwork. Naomi's in the room now. Get comfortable with it. If Miles was the leak, that landed like a warning. If he wasn't, it landed like a wince. Either way, he didn't smile again. We moved furniture, because sometimes you have to feel like you did something. Paolo took the thermostat off the wall and popped the Wi-Fi card, like a tooth. I shut down my phone and taped the camera like a teenager who thinks the NSA cares, and maybe tonight it did. Cass ran new Cokes from the back room, like he'd done it before, while we worked. The bodega bell kept ringing in my head. That ding, ding of neighbors doing ordinary life while you fight a different kind of fire. Mr. Diaz texted a photo of the city truck leaving after a patrol car rolled by, slow and uninterested. Underneath, he sent a thumbs up and a sticker of Our Lady of Guadalupe holding a broom. I saved it. By 8, we had a baby mesh. Ugly. Functional. Ours. We tested range, with Paolo on the back stairs and me by the window and Cass in the hallway. Each of us saying numbers like we were counting off in Little League. It worked. It wasn't foolproof. Nothing is. But it meant if the power cut or a server died because somebody pressed the wrong button on purpose, we'd still talk. Cass called a meeting at the small table, like it was a boardroom, and not the place I'd eaten soup an hour ago. "House rules," he said, and then looked at me. "Your rules," he corrected. "Say them." I read from the 3i5 and added 2. If comms go down, we rendezvous at Manny's Deli, back booth, no heroes, and if anyone says blue line, it means we burn the route and take a public train like 2 people who aren't worth staging a show for. Paolo wrote them down like commandments. Miles didn't write. He looked at his phone and then remembered he wasn't supposed to and set it face down. When the room emptied, Cass stayed in the doorway like always. He looked less like a storm and more like a man learning a new language that asks for gentleness where he'd spent years being steel. "You did all that, like you were flipping pancakes," he said. "It's easier to flip pancakes when you've been hungry," I said. And he smiled with his eyes. He didn't ask me to forgive anyone. He didn't promise he'd catch the mole by morning. He just said, "I'm putting you on the ops calendar for tomorrow, if you want it. Same pay as the guys, same vote, same right to say I'm wrong." It was a small sentence that landed like a door I could choose to walk through. I said yes, before I overthought it. He nodded like it was the obvious answer, and then added, "Quiet. I'm proud of you." Nobody had said that to me without an agenda in a long time. It felt like heat after cold. I slept in bursts, the radio a heartbeat at my shoulder, the city muffled by the storm moving in. Around midnight, a text buzzed on the mesh handset. Paolo running a check. In. All clear. A minute later, another buzz. A different cadence. A relay from downstairs. Dealer plates back. 2 guys smoking, taking photos at waist level. I stood and went to the window and saw them like ghosts reflected in the glass. I didn't panic. I went to the cabinet and touched the 3x5 card and breathed. Paper holds if you keep your hands on it. Tomorrow we'd make it hold harder. Tonight, we'd keep the lights on where we could, and the mesh humming where we couldn't, and the rules louder than the fear. And if someone thought they knew our route, they were going to learn we'd switched the map. By afternoon, the sky had that greenish bruise look Chicago gets when the weather's about to throw a punch. The no-way alert tone cut through the radio test like a dentist drill, long, ugly, impossible to ignore. We'd moved ops to Cass's building in River North because the mesh needed height and clean sightlines, and because he had a vault room that didn't talk to the internet unless you begged. I told myself it was just for a few hours. Grab some files, run comms, back to Kinsey before the storm hit. What I didn't expect was the way the night decided to test every rule I'd written. I took the glass elevator because the stairwell smelled like oil rags and a childhood I wasn't ready to talk about. The car slid up smooth, city lights smeared by rain, and halfway between 3 and 4, everything shuddered and went dark. Not movie dark. Emergency lights clicked in, the kind that turn everybody into a ghost version of themselves. The car stopped so hard, my knees barked. For a second, my brain pulled a fire alarm and started cataloging ways to die in a box. Then Cass's voice came over the handheld like he was sitting on the floor with me. "Hey, you're okay. 4, 2, 6. Naomi, in for 4. Hold for 2. Out for 6. Let me hear you breathe." I did it, because it's hard to argue with oxygen. The panic didn't disappear. It just got somewhere I could reach it. "Good," he said, softer. "Power out across 2 blocks. ATS is being stubborn. I'm 3 floors below you. Don't force the doors. Talk to me." I swallowed, tasted battery air, and tried for a joke that sounded more human than heroic. "I've had worse elevators. Macy's Loop, 2018. He huffed, something like a laugh, and then switched to business.
We called the engineer. He's stuck behind a lake of Uber drivers. Paolo's with him. Miles. A crackle. A beat too long. Miles is checking the lobby panel. I didn't love the pause, but I filed it and looked up at the service hatch. Every car has one. They always tell you not to use it. They're right. But the building had posted the emergency guide in the car, laminated, with a little cartoon man being very safe. And it said hatch release was staff, side only. So I stopped being clever and started being useful. "Okay," I said, hearing my own voice steady. "Tell me where the generator starter is." "Basement, west wall, red handle, but you're not—" "I know I'm not," I said, because consent is contagious. "I'm asking you to walk me to it, with words, and keep me legal." He let out that breath men save for when they're going to let you do the thing they hate, because they respect you more than their fear. "Copy. We'll get you out first." I hit the emergency phone. It rang to a recorded menu that wanted a building code I didn't have. Useless. I popped the radio again. "I can get to the landing," I said, because the car had stopped with half a door above the floor line, and I could see the bottom of a hallway, like a promise. "Do not climb," Cass said. "Even hold 5. The seconds felt like pennies dropping one by one into a jar you can't see. Then I heard it. Metal on metal. A key turned with conviction. A maintenance door on the shaft slid open above me. "I'm at your hatch," Cass said. I looked up into the emergency light circle and saw the brim of his socks cap. Not a hero shot, just a guy doing the thing. The hatch lifted. He dropped a safety strap and a harness like a magician producing exactly the rabbit you ordered. "Permission to come up," he said, and waited until I said yes. He clipped me in with slow, narrated movements. "Left hand on the rail, right hand on the strap, feet on the brace, nothing fancy." I climbed out of a box a little at a time and met him at the landing that smelled like wet concrete and aftershave. My legs shook. He didn't touch me. He put his shoulder against the door like a doorstop in case the car decided to pretend it had ideas. The hallway beyond the landing was black, except for those little glow dots they stick on exit signs. We moved by voice. "Left," he said. "Down. Watch the lip." When we hit the stairwell, the old building groaned like winter in a farmhouse. We took the stairs fast, but not stupid. On 2. The radio cracked with Paolo's voice, tight and clipped. "Lobby doors, mag, locked. Fire override not responding. Panel reads, remote lock." Another voice over him, Miles. Tinny, like he was too close to a vent. "Probably a glitch. I'm outside. Wind's wrecking the canopy." I stopped dead on the step because 2 nights ago the canopy was fine, and also because the lobby mag locks are designed to fail open in an outage, unless someone tells them not to. "Who's got the panel key?" I asked. Silence. Then Miles again. Too smooth. "Must be stuck in the box with the engineer." Cass and I looked at each other, even though we couldn't really see, because there are looks you feel. He didn't argue. He said, "We'll fix power local. Paolo, hold the lobby and keep eyes on the guys by the cones." The radio fell back to static. The generator room had that diesel tang, and that reminds you of county fairs and school buses. The hand, printed sign on the wall said, "Prime 10, CC, choke open, start." Some saint of a building engineer had ducked, taped a Sharpie arrow next to each switch, and written, "Ignore the idiot light." I know just enough about engines to break them. But I also know instructions save lives. Cass held the flashlight on the plate while I pressed the primer and counted Mississippi like a kid. I opened choke. I turned the key. The unit coughed, caught, died, then caught again like it had changed its mind. The ATS, automatic transfer switch, stared at us with a dead, eye red. "It's not switching," I said, trying not to let frustration outrun the plan. "Manual bypass," Cass said, calm like he was calling pitches. "Bottom of the panel, covered lever." I pulled the cover, smelled a whiff of hot dust and ozone,
and flipped the lever like I meant it. Somewhere above us, the building sighed back to life. Not all the way. Enough to be a heartbeat. The radio lit up. Paolo. Cameras are back on hallway only. Another voice I didn't recognize, front desk kid maybe. Lobby still locked, panel log shows, remote hold. I leaned over the console and hit the local camera toggle for basement 2. Miles appeared in frame 30 seconds later. But the angle was wrong. He wasn't outside. He was at a side corridor door. Phone out. Head down. Thumb moving like a drummer. He looked up once, right at the camera, then down again. There are moments when anger burns clean. No fireworks, no speeches, just a line getting drawn. "Cass," I said, keeping my voice level. "We've got him on B2 at 1806, phone in hand, while he says he's outside. If lobby's locked, somebody told it to be. And those cones didn't plant themselves." He didn't swear. He didn't need to. He keyed the radio. "Paolo, eyes on B2 side corridor. Bring 2. Do not spook him. He moves. You shadow. You don't grab. Naomi, stay with me." He turned to me and then stopped mid-sentence. Pivoted back to the panel like he'd remembered how much he hated ordering me anything. "Will you stay with me?" he corrected. And ridiculously, in the middle of diesel noise and storm alarms. I felt seen in a way that made my chest ache. We rode that little island of power back up to the mezzanine where the vault room lived. The glass elevator hummed weakly in its shaft, like it was offended we'd gone around it. Inside the vault, the phone sat in its cradle like a relic. I fired it up and hit the preset to IA, Internal Affairs, because if we were going to burn this, we were going to do it right. "You're speaking with heart," I said, when a bored voice picked up. "I have live video of a contract security employee disabling life, safety systems, during a storm at 415 W. The bored voice wasn't bored anymore. Took my call back, took our timestamp, asked for the building manager. Cass handed over a line that would route them to a lawyer I'd never afford on my own. We weren't calling the heroes. We were putting the right cameras in the right hands so no one could call us dramatic later. Somewhere, a wind gust hit and moaned through the facade like a train. The lobby camera finally popped into view. 2 men with dealer plates stood inside only because the mag locks held. They looked annoyed, not alarmed, snapping photos like tourists with bad manners. Paolo's team flanked the side corridor and then stepped back as Miles walked right into frame with a face like he was mid-errand. He tapped his pocket twice, the tell I'd noticed and never named, and smiled at Paolo like guys do when they want you to believe they're simple. The power held. The radios held. My hands stopped shaking. "You did that?" Cass said. And it wasn't praise as much as a report from the field. I thought about the elevator, about the breath count, about the lever that only moved because I touched it. "We did that," I corrected. Then I wrote the time on my spiral because paper doesn't care about storms. And sometimes the only way through a black glass night is to make the lights you need and trust they'll be enough. The plan fit on a post. Because that's how I calm my brain. 3 lines. No heroics. 1. Bait. 2. Record. 3. Hand the match to people who can actually light the fuse without burning down the wrong house. I texted Trent from the burner with the exact flavor of apology he always swallowed. "I'm tired of fighting. I just need to talk. Alone. South Branch. Westgate by the rusted crane. 9 p.m. It read like surrender because that's the script he wrote for me for years. And sometimes the only way out is to make the script choke on itself. Then I opened voice memos and a backup app and clipped a tiny recorder to the inside seam of my jacket like a stagehand. Set my phone to dump audio to the SAT device if it lost service, and slid a cheap GPS tag, not my daily one, a semi-static throwaway from Ace, into a canvas tote, with a water bottle, and a granola bar, like a woman who came to cry, not to fight. Cass hated every pixel of it. He didn't say don't. He said, "I'm asking to be 90 seconds away with eyes on, and your stop word means I walk, not run." And when I said blue line, he repeated it back. Once, like a vow. Rosa texted me a St. Michael keychain on a little carabiner. "Clip it to your tote. Humor me." And Mr. Diaz stuck a foil, wrapped empanada in my hand on my way out like carbs or armor. I laughed. Then I ate half anyway, because fear burns through blood sugar faster than truth does. The container yard on the South Branch has a particular smell. River rot, diesel breath, and old iron. It takes you right back to every bad job you ever had, hauling things for people who didn't know your name. Sodium lights made everything the color of a bruise. A Metra horn carried from somewhere over by the bridges, and the wind came hard enough off the water to sting my eyes without making me cry, which felt like God doing me a solid for once. I picked my line in the dirt. 20. 1 feet from where I wanted him to stop. Because that's the distance every self. Defense class teaches you to respect, and because boundaries are easier when you can see them. Cass's team set in at the edges like shadows with radios. The state's attorney's investigator, a woman with a South Side accent and a jaw like granite, tucked herself in a long lens cam behind the stacked blues. Harper had the smallest camera I've ever seen, and the kind of stillness you only learn on sidewalks where running gets you hurt twice. I kept my tote on my left, so the mic faced the windbreak of the containers, and held my hands out so he could see I wasn't hiding anything that would satisfy the part of him that only respects threats. I heard him before I saw him, the specific cadence of a man who never learned to be quiet, because the world rewarded his noise. He came in wearing civilian clothes he thought made him look like everyone else, and the same watch I'd bought on sale the second year we were married, a good memory souring in real time. He smiled like he wanted a camera and didn't see the one that mattered. "There you are," he said, relief and reproof braided together. His favorite rope. "You finally came to your senses." I thought my hands would shake. They didn't. They warmed. "No," I said, and it landed flat, which is stronger than loud. He stepped closer, exactly the way he always did. 2 steps inside your air, half a step into your bones, until I raised my palm. Not a stop sign, just a reminder. 21 feet, I said. "That's my line." He laughed like I was adorable. "You brought a measuring tape to our marriage now." "I brought rules," I said. "Real ones, out loud." I saw the moment it clicked that I wasn't there to plead. His eyes got small, the way men's eyes do when the toy they thought they broke starts working again. He said my name like he owned the deed, and I let him, because the recorder needed him uncoached. "You violated the protective order last week at the gallery," I said, keeping my voice even, the way a clerk reads into the mic for the record. "You called me from blocked numbers. You threatened Cass and the people he employs. And you told me you'd take me home, whether I liked it or not." "I never said," he started, too fast, and then recalibrated into cop careful. "I'm trying to help you, Naomi. You're confused. People are using you. This..." He gestured at the yard like he wanted an audience to nod. "This is not you. You don't get to define me," I said. And I heard Rosa's voice in my head saying, "Keep sentences short when you're telling the truth. You also don't get to edit the logs on domestic calls at 2 a.m. with someone else's login. I know the dates. Trent. I know the IMEI. I know about the complaint that evaporated between 2 case managers, like a coin trick." The wind rattled a loose chain somewhere. He put his hands up in that pantomime that cameras love. And if I hadn't known him, I might have thought it was peace. What it was, theater for his future claim that I was hysterical and he was calm. "Come on," he said, switching keys like a man trying old doors. "You're tired. This guy, what's his name? The coat? He's got you thinking you're a spy. You're a clerk. You file." I didn't blink. "I remember," I said, which is the one thing a man like that can't steal. "And I record." I tipped my chin at the tote so his eyes would follow, and the state's attorney investigator would have him on tape, watching the bag that held the mic. His phone buzzed. He didn't look because he wanted me to believe I was the only thing in the world for him. Then he looked because he couldn't help himself. Predators are curious. It's how they stay alive until they don't. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. And there it was, the church voice, and the kind tone he used with witnesses and toddlers and me on the days. He wanted to sell me on my own smallness. You're going to hand me that drive you stole. You're going to apologize for embarrassing me. And you're going to get in my car. And we'll figure the rest out with IA and the union. Nobody needs to know the ugly parts. The ugly parts. The way he used to say it in a whisper against my hair when he needed me to swallow something unswallowable. I let the silence stretch because the recorder loves silence. Juries do too, once they learn to listen. I don't have the drive, I said. Harper does, and a copy lives where you can't reach it. What I do have is your voice on my phone, telling me exactly how you plan to make me small again. He smiled, a little. There you go, with the drama. Then he leaned almost imperceptibly toward his waistband, like he wanted me to remember. He had options, I didn't. Adrenaline hit my teeth. I didn't step back. That part shocked me. It all saved me. Blue line, I said, at a normal volume, like I was commenting on the weather. And 30 yards away, Cass exhaled a word I didn't hear, and the yard changed temperature. 2 unmarked sedans lit their reds without sirens. The investigator stepped from behind the steel and read the protective order violation, like scripture. Harper's camera didn't blink. Trent did what men like him do. He tried to talk consequences. This is entrapment, he said, loud for the record he thought he controlled. She called me. She begged. We have the call, the investigator said, flat. We have the texts. We have your feet on county property in violation of a court order, Detective Mallory, and we have your habit. She said the last word like a diagnosis. He looked right at me then, and the kind part of his face left. You think this ends how you want? He said. Not loud. Not for anyone else. Just for the old me. You're not built for this. I thought about the elevator. I thought about the lever and the choke and the way the building sighed back to life, because I told it to. I'm built for exactly this, I said. Rules and receipts. Behind him, Cass kept his distance. Hands visible. Body an open door I could take or not. That mattered more than every law in the world right then, because it meant the person who loved me might also finally be someone who didn't need to own me to keep me. The cuffs went on with a sad little click that sounds like a coin drop when addiction calls itself power. He kept talking, because he doesn't know how not to. The recorder took it all without judgment. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. There's a difference. The wind pushed a wave against the pilings and sprayed my shoes, and for once I didn't call it a bad omen. It felt like the river was clearing its throat for the next line. They booked Trent, and the night didn't snap back to normal. It just shifted weight. The investigator took my recorder like it was a newborn and walked it to an unmarked with more care than I've ever seen a city give to evidence. Harper squeezed my forearm once. No words, because we both knew. Talking Burns tape, and ghosted off to file copy. Cass stayed where I could see him. Not behind me, not in front. If you've ever been in a fight where the danger finally leaves your skin, you know how the weird float that comes after, like your body forgot what it's supposed to do next. I thought it would be sleep. It was work. IA wanted a statement, while my memory still had teeth. We convoyed back to River North to use the vault room because the building's cameras now lived and died by switches we controlled, and because the power we'd muscled back on felt like a promise I didn't want to break. Paolo did a sweep. The generator hummed like a contented appliance. Miles showed up with a cup holder full of diner coffees and the look men get when they're about to tell you they saved the day. Saw the booking. Good work, he said, sliding a cup my way like he'd cooked it. But the union's going to lose its mind. We should move you to the West Loop loft. Fewer angles from the street. He had a lot of details for a man who was supposed to be one radio hop out. I didn't say it. I flipped the post. It with the plan for Phase 2. Document the leak. Hand it off. Step back. Simple doesn't mean easy. IA called in on the S8 line. The investigator, same granite voice, said, "We've got your B2 footage and your lobby logs. Hold your guy." She didn't say which guy. She didn't have to. Cass said, "Copy," like he was back on some frequency he'd sworn off. He stood aside so I could sit at the desk and build a clean timeline. The fake city truck. The power cut. the maglocks that failed the wrong way, the panel accessed from B2 while somebody said he was outside. I don't have the kind of brain that does swagger. I have the kind that makes neat boxes you can't argue with. While I wrote, Miles hovered in that, too, helpful way, offering to run security notes to the printer, to check the stairwell again, to walk me to the restroom, which was the kind of helpful I've learned to decline without apology. "I'm good," I said, and kept my pen moving. He tapped his front pocket twice, the lighter that didn't exist, and my stomach did that cold precision thing again. I caught Cass's eye and saw that he caught it too. "Slow is fast," Rosa says. "You don't yank a splinter with your fist." Here's the thing I hadn't told Cass yet. When we were wiring the mesh earlier, I asked Miles to test a broadcast app on his phone. Just hit allow, it lets me see the channel load. And he'd done it without thinking, and the way guys do when a woman in a hoodie and a ponytail hands them a tech problem. He hit allow screen record, and then he hit don't ask again. You know those stupid HDMI sticks you buy at Best Buy so you can cast your nephew's soccer game onto a TV? We had one plugged into the vault screen. It had a name I'd renamed Viewcast. Naomi. When Miles walked in with coffees, his phone woke up and helpfully reconnected to the only thing in this building that still wanted to listen to him. I clicked the source over like I was changing inputs to watch the game. Miles's home screen bloomed up on the glass. He didn't notice at first. None of us do. You live your life married to a rectangle, and you forget it can make a room breathe different. A banner rolled down from the top. "C. Unk. You got the lock?" Then another. "C. Unk. Cones pulled. Pick pulls." The thread opened itself like it had been waiting to be seen. Names were initials or emojis, because cowards think that makes them smart. There was a photo of the B2 panel taken 30 minutes into the outage. The lobby lock option toggled with a little green that said the quiet part out loud. A pin dropped on our corner with a heart like you'd mark a brunch place. And then a short screen. Record from earlier in the day. Miles's thumb tapping our ops channel. Copying Cass's ETD and route straight into the thread with the caption, "Gift wrapped." I didn't go theatrical. I didn't gasp. I said, "Hey, could you not text in here?" Like a manager, about to write someone up. Miles turned, annoyed, and saw his life on the glass. For a second, he did that thing where you hope glare is a shield. And then he went very still and very blank, and the way men do when they're deciding between running and lawyering up. Paolo didn't wait for him to pick. He moved in from behind, with a calm I envied and a zip tie already looped. Miles started with the innocent act. "What is this? Did you put something on my phone?" And then pivoted to righteous. "You can't look at my private," and then to useful. I was feeding false routes to smoke out the leak. Cass didn't raise his voice. "You fed real routes," he said, and that calm cut more than volume. "You locked a lobby during an outage. You put her in a box." Miles saw the Herland and tried to turn it. "I was keeping her off the street," he said, like benevolence made it less ugly. "You were keeping me contained," I said, "because if you name it, it loses a tooth." The SAT phone buzzed again. IA had a unit in the area, and the marshals. Looped because protective orders make everything well. We're at the curb. The moment braided itself tight. Generator hum. Rain finding every seam in the windows. Paolo securing Miles's wrists with the practiced courtesy of someone who's had his own hands looped before. In that little silence, I felt, not triumph, exactly, a click, like a chain you've been sawing at for months, finally giving with a soft sound only you care about. They took Miles in the hallway without drama. He kept asking to explain, the way men in, over their heads, think a paragraph might change physics. The investigator stepped into the vault long enough to tap the glass and say, "We'll need a copy of this cast." I backed it up twice, once to a drive, once to the asset, and wrote the time on the spiral, because signatures aren't just for weddings. Down on the South Branch, where they'd staged the transfer, Trent decided to write a different story. The marshal's radio, patched to us by request, because life is weird, popped with the crisp voice of a woman who'd done this too many times to make it meaningful every time. Subject attempting to... Ankle holster recovered. Stand by. There was a scuff sound that my nervous system recognized and my head wished it didn't. I pictured the 20, 1 feet in the dirt, and my hand up, and his eyes when he realized the aisle was closed. He's fine, the voice said a beat later. Professional, but not unkind. Non, lethal deployed. No shots fired. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until Cass tapped the desk. Not my hand, the desk, and said, breathe, like an inside joke we'd earned. Here's what I want to tell you, because TV won't. It didn't feel like fireworks. No confetti, no slow clap,
No instant relief. It felt orderly. Papers in boxes, names in columns. A screen that told the truth, because somebody made it. I thought I'd want to scream. I told you so at the ceiling. But all I wanted was to sit for a minute and let my spine figure out. I didn't need to be taller than myself anymore. Paolo came back and leaned in the doorway, the way men do when they're guarding a threshold, but also giving you privacy. You good? He asked. I said. I'm not sure that's the right question. And he cracked a smile. Okay, try this. You hungry? I laughed, which felt like borrowing from a future I might get to keep. Always, I said. He left and returned with Mr. Diaz's foil, wrapped empanada I hadn't finished, and a can of LaCroix that tasted like someone whispered the word raspberry to water and called it a day. We ate on the edge of the world's ugliest beautiful desk. Cass watched me like a man trying to learn what steadiness looks like when it's not the same as control. You didn't have to pull anything tonight, he said after a while, tone more report than praise. You wrote the rules, and the rules held. I thought about the elevator, the generator, the lobby lock, the cast, the thread on the screen with all its ugly hearts. It's not that I won't fight, I said. I just don't want to confuse the feeling of fighting with the work of winning. He nodded like he'd been waiting to hear me say it to myself. Later, after the statements and the copies and the handshake with the investigator that meant, in her language, respect, I stood at the window and watched the city settle after a storm. The mag locks had been reset to fail open. The cones were gone. The fake truck had been towed. Citation fluttering under a wiper blade like a punchline. Somewhere on a different floor, a neighbor's TV murmured a game. The mesh radios clicked and went quiet. My 3x5 card was still taped inside the cabinet. When your life's been small on purpose for so long, expansion doesn't come like a balloon. It comes like your lungs, remembering their job. I didn't feel sorry for Miles. I didn't feel giddy about Trent. I felt responsible for the part I could control, telling the truth clean, making a record solid, not letting my fear steer me into a brand of revenge that would taste good for a night and poison me for a year. There's a word Rosa loves, sober. She doesn't just mean substance. She means that level, eyed calm you carry into rooms that used to undo you. That's what it felt like when the chain broke. Not a bang, a quiet click you feel in your bones, followed by enough silence to hear your own yes. We didn't celebrate with champagne or a headline. We went up to the rooftop greenhouse because plants don't lie, and the lake air scrubs your head better than any therapist on a rushed Tuesday. The glass sweated from the day's storm, and beyond it the city had that freshly washed look. Adler a quiet glow. The Ferris wheel at Navy Pier tracing slow circles like someone doodling in the margin of night. Cass had dragged 2 metal stools to the corner where the heaters actually work and set a paper bag from a 24-hour diner between us. Waffles still warm, butter trying to escape. He didn't do speeches. He just pulled something from his pocket and set it on my knee. A Liberty silver dollar, smooth with years, not stunt, new. You call it, he said. Heads. I'm here as long as you want me. Tails. I'm here as long as you want me. Either way, you're the one tossing. It would have been corny from anyone else. From him it landed like a door I owned. I didn't flip it yet. I turned it in my fingers and traced the edge, the way I used to trace the city limits on a folded CTA map at 18 when I thought knowledge alone could keep me from getting lost. My phone buzzed once. Harper. GJ voted true bill. And then again with a short note from the state's attorney investigator.
Miles cooperating. Charges formal tomorrow. No exclamation points. I didn't need them. Quiet is the sound you want when the right gears finally catch. I told Cass first, because he'd earned the right to hear things as they become real. He nodded, satisfaction measured, like a man who refuses to jinx a fourth quarter drive. So, he said, not looking at the coin, but at me. What do you want that isn't about them? I surprised myself by having a real answer. Rose's class at St. Agnes needs someone to manage data for their cases, I said. Not just spreadsheets, chain of custody, FOIA requests, training volunteers on how to build timelines. So judges can't shrug. I want to do that. I want to teach people who've been told they're unreliable narrators how to make records so clean the story tells itself. He smiled with his eyes, that rare, unarmored thing. Tell me what you need. A boring copier that never jams, I said, and we both laughed, because it's always the small stuff that breaks you when the big stuff finally stops trying. I flipped the coin, not because I had to, but because the muscle memory of choosing felt like a prayer. It spun, flashed, landed on my palm, and before I even looked, I said, I'm staying. I meant it the way you mean, I'm sober, or I forgive you, only when you know those words end up being verbs. But there are rules, I added, because the person I'm keeping is the one who writes rules on 3x5 cards and tapes them where Panic can see them. We don't do secrets that could get me indicted by association. We don't do for your own good. If I say stop, we stop. If I need distance, you don't turn distance into punishment. If I say come with me to the church basement on a Wednesday and stack chairs after a workshop, you ask where they go and you listen instead of fixing. He didn't flinch. Done, he said. Easy. Like signing the first receipt in the bus station again. He didn't reach for me. He let the space be what I made it. That mattered more than the coin. Rosa texted a photo of the empty fellowship hall and a caption that made me laugh loud enough to fog the glass. You teaching next week, or you too fancy for folding tables now? I typed back. Next week. Data 101. Bring your crankiest aunties. My hands were steady on the screen. I thought about the girl I used to be. The one who counted exits like the alphabet. She's still here. She runs my comms. She checks my locks. She doesn't apologize to men who mistake her quiet for consent. There's room for her and the woman who looked a man in the eye by the river and chose the wind. Somewhere below us, a siren stitched a blue line through the night. Not for me. The mesh radio on the shelf gave a soft, pointless click and fell quiet. The city kept breathing. I told Cass about the toolkit I want to build. Open. Source templates for FOIAs. A little web app that teaches people how to read a property log without a law degree. A poster that says, rules aren't rigid. They're rails and big letters for the church wall. He said he'd fund what I wouldn't accept from him personally by running it through a community fund with a board that could fire me if I got bossy. Equal pay, equal vote, and the right to tell me no, he said. And there wasn't a wobble in it. I tucked the coin into the small pocket of my jacket, where women are told to keep lip balm, and kept my other hand free, because there's a kind of romance that isn't hands at all. It's making sure the door stays a door. We ate waffles with our fingers, the way kids do at 2 a.m. after a game, and talked about small, dumb things, socks or cubs, thin crust versus deep dish, why the planetarium parking lot has the best skyline view if you're broke, and need to remember, you picked out this life on purpose. The wind pressed against the greenhouse and didn't get in. When we were done, he gathered the trash and paused at the stairs. Do you want me to stay tonight? He asked. And there wasn't a hint of pressure in it. Just an invitation you can answer without breaking something. Yeah, I said, honest to the bone. But on the couch. Tomorrow we'll see. He grinned. Relief and respect in the same exhale, and bumped the door with his hip on the way out, like a man happy to obey furniture. I stood alone a minute longer and looked at the city that didn't save me and didn't have to. Saving yourself is uglier than TV and less photogenic than a hero shot, but it teaches your hands what yes feels like. My 3x5 card was in my back pocket. My future wasn't a movie. It was a Wednesday night with cheap coffee and stubborn aunties and a copier that better not die. It was a man who could be steel when needed and choose gentleness when asked. It was a coin in a pocket that meant nothing and everything. I synced the last of the files to a drive with a label that would make sense to a stranger. Texted Harper a thumbs up and a heart she'd pretend to hate, and sent Rosa a calendar invite titled Sovereign Night because naming things is power. Then I locked the greenhouse, took the stairs 2 at a time, and went to sleep with the window cracked enough to hear the lake tell its old story of persistence. In the morning, I'd start building a different kind of case, the kind where women walk in carrying their own names and walk out with paper that holds. Tonight, it was enough to know I'd get to choose again tomorrow.